Number 1. The beginning of terror. San Francisco's mysterious killer. It was the late 1960s, a time when America was already on edge. The Vietnam War was raging, protests filled the streets, and the country felt divided in ways it hadn't before. But in Northern California, a new kind of fear was about to take hold. Not political, not social, but deeply personal. A fear that lived in the shadows, waiting for unsuspecting victims. This fear had a name, or rather, it gave itself one: the Zodiac Killer. But how did it all begin? The first attacks were so brutal, so sudden, that they seemed random at first. Two young couples, miles apart, would become the earliest known victims. But these crimes were anything but random. They carried the signature of a predator who wanted the world to know he was out there. On December 20th, 1968, in the quiet town of Vallejo, California, teenagers Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday went on what should have been an innocent first date. They drove to a remote area, a lover's lane spot, far from the busy streets of town. But what was supposed to be a night filled with teenage dreams ended in horror. As they sat in their car, another vehicle pulled up behind them. Out stepped a man. We don't know his face. We don't know his voice. But what we do know is that he pulled out a gun and opened fire. David Faraday was shot once in the head at close range. Betty Lou Jensen tried to run. She didn't make it far. 5 bullets tore through her back as she collapsed just feet away from the car. The crime shocked the small community, but police chalked it up as a brutal yet isolated case. After all, random shootings did happen. At least, that's what they told themselves. But the truth? This was only the beginning. Fast forward to July 4th, 1969. America was celebrating Independence Day. Fireworks lit the sky. Families gathered for picnics. But on the outskirts of Vallejo, another nightmare was about to unfold. Darlene Ferrin, a young woman known for her bright smile and friendly nature, drove with her friend Mike Mageau to Blue Rock Springs Park. They sat in her car, enjoying the summer night. Then, just as before, another vehicle pulled up. The driver got out and approached. Without warning, he opened fire through the window. Mike was shot several times, but survived. Darlene wasn't so lucky. She was struck multiple times and died before help could reach her. This time, it couldn't be dismissed as random, because shortly after the shooting, the Vallejo Police Department received a chilling phone call. A calm male voice confessed to the murders. Not just the attack on Darlene and Mike, but also the killing of Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday 6 months earlier. The police now knew something terrifying. There was a serial killer in their midst. But who was he? And why was he doing this? The man on the phone gave no name. No motive. No apology. He wanted credit, yes, but he wanted something more. Something darker. Attention. Fear. Control. Imagine being in San Francisco or Vallejo at that time. You're hearing about young couples being targeted in places that were supposed to be safe. The quiet back roads. The local parks. Anywhere could be next. Would you have dared to go out at night? Would you have trusted a car pulling up behind you on a lonely stretch of road? The Zodiac's reign of terror wasn't just about killing. It was about psychological warfare. He wanted the city, the whole country, to feel his presence. And soon, he would make sure they did. Because after the bullets came the letters. Letters that taunted the police, mocked the public, and made one bold, terrifying promise. This is the Zodiac speaking. The Bay Area would never be the same again. The world was about to meet a killer who craved the spotlight, a murderer who played games with law enforcement, and a shadow that still lingers over San Francisco decades later. And it all started with 2 young couples, whose lives were cut short for reasons no one could explain. But this was just the opening act. The real horror and the mystery was yet to come. Number 2. The letters, the codes, and the media frenzy. The murders were horrifying enough. But what set the Zodiac Killer apart from nearly every criminal in history wasn't just the violence. It was his voice. Not the one heard in the phone call to Vallejo police, but the one written in ink. Just weeks after the Blue Rock Springs attack, on August 1st, 1969, 3 major newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald, each received a letter. The letters began with chilling words. This is the Zodiac speaking. Each letter contained not only confessions of the crimes, but also a piece of something even stranger, a coded message. A cipher, made up of strange symbols, circles, and odd characters. The killer demanded that all 3 papers publish his messages on the front page. If they didn't, he warned, he would go on a killing spree. The newspapers complied. The ciphers appeared for the world to see, sparking both fascination and fear. Readers tried to crack them. Amateur code breakers scribbled late into the night. Some saw them as puzzles. Others saw them as threats. But everyone was watching. That's exactly what the Zodiac wanted. Within a week, the mystery deepened. A California schoolteacher named Donald Hardin and his wife, Betty, managed to solve the first cipher. What it revealed was disturbing. The killer claimed he murdered because he enjoyed it. He compared it to hunting wild game. He wrote of collecting slaves for the afterlife. But chillingly, the cipher ended with a taunt. My name is, and then, nothing. A string of gibberish symbols. No real name. No clear identity. Just a mocking reminder that the killer was in control. The media exploded. Front-page headlines screamed about the Zodiac. Television and radio covered every new letter, every police development. Ordinary citizens scanned the faces of strangers in diners, at gas stations, in grocery store aisles, wondering, could he be the one? The killer thrived on this attention. Between 1969 and 1974, the Zodiac would send dozens of letters and postcards. Some contained more ciphers. Others included threats against school buses filled with children. He described in detail how he could shoot out the tires of a bus and then pick off the kiddies as they came bouncing out. Parents panicked. Children were kept home from school. Bus drivers drove their routes in fear, constantly checking the rearview mirror for a car that might be following too closely. This was no longer just murder. It was terrorism. But the Zodiac's letters weren't just threats. They were also games. He drew his now infamous crosshair symbol, a circle with a plus sign through it. He teased police with details only the killer would know. He even sent a piece of a bloody shirt from one of his victims as proof of authenticity. Imagine the arrogance. A manhunt was underway. Detectives worked around the clock. And yet, the Zodiac sat somewhere, calmly writing, knowing his words would be on the front page the next day. Why was he doing this? Was it ego? A twisted sense of humor? Or something darker? A compulsion to be feared and remembered forever? The letters seemed to be his way of playing puppet master, pulling the strings of an entire city. But with the media came mistakes. The more he communicated, the more chances he gave investigators to catch him. Handwriting experts studied his letters. Linguists analyzed his phrasing. Psychologists tried to profile him. And yet, despite all the resources thrown at the case, the Zodiac stayed one step ahead. Every new cipher brought hope of unmasking him. But just as quickly, every new puzzle turned into another dead end. Some ciphers remain unsolved to this day. Think about that for a moment. A killer left behind codes more than 50 years ago, and even with modern supercomputers and cryptographers, not all of them have been cracked. What was hidden in those symbols? His name? His motive? Or just another cruel joke? By this point, the Zodiac had transformed from a local murderer into a cultural phenomenon. He wasn't just haunting Vallejo or San Francisco anymore. He was haunting the nation. The killer had become a ghostly celebrity, nameless, faceless, yet everywhere. And the more the public obsessed over his letters and ciphers, the more brazen he became. Because for the Zodiac, fear was the ultimate prize. But while the media played his game, the police were desperate. Could the letters finally lead them to a suspect? Or was the Zodiac always going to remain a shadow, just beyond their reach? The hunt for the killer was about to take center stage, and with it, a growing list of suspects that would shock the nation. Number 3. The investigations and suspects that shocked the nation. The Zodiac's taunts had pushed the Bay Area into a frenzy. Every time a letter arrived at a newsroom, it sent shockwaves through the community. Police scrambled, the public panicked, and the media ran wild. But beneath the chaos, detectives were chasing something far more elusive, the man himself. And with every clue, every cipher, every terrifying phone call came the same burning question. Who was the Zodiac Killer? From the start, investigators had suspects. In fact, at various points in the case, there were thousands of potential names. But a handful stood out, becoming infamous in their own right. The first and most enduring? Otto Lee Allen. Allen was a former schoolteacher, dismissed from his job after accusations of inappropriate behavior. He had a disturbing past, a fascination with violent fantasies, and he lived in Vallejo, right where the killings began. Detectives discovered Allen wore a Zodiac brand wristwatch, complete with the crosshair symbol. He was known to talk about hunting people as the ultimate game, and multiple acquaintances reported him saying things eerily similar to what the Zodiac wrote in his letters. But here's the problem: nothing ever stuck. Handwriting analysis didn't match. Fingerprints didn't match. And when DNA testing became available decades later, Allen's samples didn't match either. So is Arthur Lee Allen the Zodiac? Or just a deeply troubled man who fit the profile a little too well? But Allen wasn't the only one. Another chilling suspect was Richard Gaikowski, a journalist who worked for an alternative newspaper in San Francisco. Why him? For one, his name seemed to fit some interpretations of the unsolved ciphers. His physical appearance lined up with witness descriptions. And even more disturbing, people close to him later claimed he had a dark obsession with the Zodiac case. But again, the evidence was circumstantial. No confession, no forensic proof, just unsettling coincidences. There was also Lawrence Kane, a career criminal with a history of stalking women. He lived near several of the crime scenes, and, according to some investigators, his name could be pieced together from the Zodiac ciphers. Even a retired police officer swore Kane was the man he had pulled over near a Zodiac crime scene. But just like Allen and Gaikowski, Kane never faced charges. And the list went on. Teachers, journalists, former military men, even random neighbors who happened to resemble police sketches. The Zodiac shadow was so large that it seemed anyone could be a suspect. But perhaps the most chilling part of the investigation wasn't who the suspects were. It was how many times police may have been close, too close. There are stories of patrol officers stopping a man who matched the Zodiac's description, just blocks away from one of the crime scenes, and then letting him go after being told the suspect had been spotted elsewhere. Imagine that. The killer, standing just feet from police officers, walking away into the night while they searched in the opposite direction. How many times was he nearly caught? How many times did he slip through by sheer luck, or by playing the part of an ordinary man? The failures haunted law enforcement. Different counties, different police departments, and even the FBI were all involved. But the lack of coordination often meant leads were lost, evidence was mishandled, and momentum was broken. One detective later admitted that the Zodiac case was a nightmare of jurisdiction. The killer knew it, too. His letters often mocked police for their inability to catch him. And maybe that was part of his game all along. As the years went on, suspects came and went. Tips poured in from all over the country. Some swore their ex-husband was the Zodiac. Others claimed their co-worker, their uncle, even their neighbor's quiet friend down the street. But none of it ever ended in an arrest. The Zodiac remained free, uncaged, untouchable, and as time passed, the trail grew cold. Witnesses aged, detectives retired, evidence degraded, but the fear? That never faded. Because if the Zodiac could kill so many, taunt so openly, and still walk away a free man, what else was he capable of? Was he still alive, watching the news coverage of his own mystery? Was he reading the theories, laughing as strangers debated his identity? Or had he taken his secrets to the grave? For decades, no one knew. But then, years later, something incredible happened. A breakthrough, a glimmer of new hope. Technology had caught up with the case. And suddenly, the Zodiac wasn't as untouchable as he once seemed. Number 4. New evidence. Breakthroughs in DNA and technology for decades. The Zodiac case seemed frozen in time. Police sketches, yellowed files, and unsolved ciphers were all that remained. But in the 21st century, something began to shift. Technology had advanced far beyond what investigators in the 1960s and 70s could have imagined. Suddenly, The ghost of the Zodiac didn't feel so untouchable anymore. Could DNA finally unmask him? The first major breakthrough came with the rise of forensic genealogy, the same technique that caught the Golden State Killer in 2018. By tracing DNA through public ancestry databases, detectives had identified a serial rapist and murderer who'd eluded police for decades. The case sent shockwaves through the true crime world. If it worked once, why not again? Investigators turned back to the Zodiac files. Over the years, they had collected saliva from stamps and envelopes the killer had licked before mailing his taunting letters. If those letters were authentic, they could hold his DNA. The question was, after half a century, would there be enough genetic material left to test? Labs began running tests. Rumors circulated. Was the Zodiac's genetic fingerprint finally within reach? At first, the results were frustrating. The samples were often contaminated or too degraded. Early tests ruled out certain suspects, including the infamous Arthur Lee Allen, but they didn't provide a definitive match. Still, the hope remained. Each advancement in DNA technology brought a new wave of optimism. Each time, people wondered, was this it? Was the Zodiac about to be unmasked? Then, in late 2020, a group of private investigators calling themselves the Case Breakers made headlines. They claimed they had identified the Zodiac Killer as a man named Gary Francis Post, an Air Force veteran who had died in 2018. The Case Breakers pointed to scars on Post's forehead that seemed to match police sketches. They suggested his name fit into one of the Zodiac's unsolved ciphers, and they claimed to have forensic evidence tying him to the crimes. The story went viral. For a brief moment, the world thought the mystery was finally solved. But the celebration didn't last long. Law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, quickly pushed back. They said the case was still open, and there was no conclusive evidence linking Post to the murders. Critics accused the Case Breakers of chasing headlines rather than presenting solid proof. Was Gary Post truly the Zodiac? Or was he just another name added to the endless list of suspects? The debate raged on. Meanwhile, another breakthrough had occurred in December 2020, not about the killer's identity, but about his words. A team of international codebreakers finally cracked the 340-character cipher, one of the Zodiac's most infamous puzzles that had gone unsolved for 51 years. The solution didn't reveal his name. The Zodiac bragged about eluding police. He mocked the idea of being caught. He signed off with his chilling symbol. It was a reminder that this wasn't just about who he was. It was about the terror he enjoyed spreading, even decades later. But DNA remained the golden key. As recently as 2023, reports surfaced that investigators were retesting evidence with new methods, hoping for a clean profile that could be run through genealogical databases. Think about it. The answer to one of the greatest true crime mysteries of all time could be sitting in a tiny piece of saliva on a letter from 1969. What if the killer's distant cousin had uploaded their DNA to a genealogy site? What if, right now, the Zodiac's family tree was quietly mapped out in a database, waiting for someone to connect the dots? It's not science fiction anymore. It's reality. So where does that leave us? We have suspects who almost fit, but not quite. Letters that taunt, but don't confess. DNA that tempts us with hope, but still refuses to give a definitive name. And yet, each year, technology grows stronger. Each year, cold cases once thought impossible to solve are suddenly closed. The Zodiac case isn't just a mystery frozen in the past. It's alive, active, and still unfolding. The question is, will technology finally expose him before the trail goes cold forever? Or will the Zodiac remain a faceless ghost, mocking us from the pages of history? Number 5. The legacy of fear. Will the Zodiac ever be unmasked? It has been more than 50 years since the Zodiac Killer first unleashed terror on California. Half a century of theories, suspects, and ciphers. Half a century of fear and fascination. Yet, one haunting truth remains. The Zodiac was never caught. And maybe that's why his story still lingers. Think about other killers of his time. Charles Manson, Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy. They were caught, put on trial, and their reign of terror ended in handcuffs. The Zodiac? He slipped away. He became a ghost. That mystery is part of his chilling power. He didn't just commit murders. He left behind questions that still keep people awake at night. Who was he really? Why'd he do it? And is it possible he's still out there? Culturally, the Zodiac Killer has become more than just a criminal. He's become a dark legend. His name appears in books, movies, podcasts, and documentaries. Hollywood has turned his crimes into films. Internet forums are filled with amateur sleuths dissecting every detail. But here's the chilling part. This is exactly what he wanted. From the beginning, the Zodiac craved attention. His letters weren't just confessions. They were performances. His ciphers weren't just puzzles. They were a way to keep people guessing. He wanted control, not just over his victims, but over an entire city, maybe even an entire generation. And in a way, he got it. Decades later, we're still talking about him, still trying to solve his games, still giving him exactly what he demanded, our attention. But the Zodiac's legacy isn't just about mystery. It's also about failure. Law enforcement's inability to catch him revealed flaws in the system. Poor coordination between jurisdictions, lack of technology, and the dangers of underestimating a criminal who thought outside the box. Some believe that if the Zodiac operated today, with modern surveillance cameras, cell phone tracking, and DNA technology, he wouldn't have lasted long. But back then, he thrived in the gaps of the system. It makes you wonder, how many other killers got away because of the same cracks? And then there's the question that keeps true crime fans debating endlessly. Will the Zodiac ever truly be unmasked? Some say yes. With modern genealogy, it's only a matter of time before DNA links the killer to a name. A single match in a database could unravel the mystery. The answer might be sitting in a lab right now, waiting to be connected. Others argue no, that the killer is already dead, his secrets buried with him, that the DNA is too degraded, the evidence too old, the trail too cold. So which is it? A name waiting to be discovered, or a mystery destined to remain unsolved? But maybe the more important question isn't who the Zodiac was. It's why his story still grips us. Why do we keep coming back to his letters, his ciphers, his crimes? Perhaps it's because the Zodiac represents the ultimate fear. The idea that evil can walk among us, unseen and unpunished. That a person can kill, taunt, and vanish, leaving only shadows behind. Or perhaps it's because we need answers. Humans crave closure, and the Zodiac case denies us that. It leaves the wound open. So, will the Zodiac ever be unmasked? Maybe, maybe not. But one thing is certain, his shadow still looms large. Every time a new lead surfaces, every time a cipher is cracked, every time a name is whispered, the world leans in just a little closer. The Zodiac Killer wanted to be remembered, and he was. His crimes ended lives, shattered families, and scarred communities. But his legend? That continues. And until the day comes when science, luck, or a long-lost confession finally reveals the truth, the Zodiac remains what he always wanted to be. A name, a symbol, a fear that refuses to die.